Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this week's episode, the first episode of our new season of the Student Impact Report, brought to you by the Student Basic Needs Coalition. My name is Taylor Allgood, joining you from Washington, D.C., and today I'm joined by none other than Owen Tanner-Flomberg, co-founder and co-executive director of SBNC. Hi, Owen.
Hey, Taylor, glad to be here.
So, a little bit more about Owen before we dive into our conversation for today. Owen is an attorney and co-founder of the Student Basic Needs Coalition, a national nonprofit working to ensure that every college student can meet their basic needs and complete their degree. Owen co-founded SBNC while a student at the University of Tennessee, where he earned his BA in political economy before completing his JD in LLM at Washington University in St. Louis. So today he helps lead SBNC's efforts to scale its AI-powered benefits platform Navi, which connects students to SNAP and Medicaid, and works with campuses and policymakers nationwide to create lasting solutions to student poverty. So as you all know, the SBNC organization is the reason why we have this podcast. So I'm really happy to speak to you today. And Owen's going to be joining us for future episodes as well. So we'll be covering some news in each episode before opening it up to student interviews. So welcome, Owen.
Yeah, well, thanks so much, Taylor, for that introduction. And yes, so glad to finally be able to join the podcast for season 2. I really enjoyed all the work y'all did in season 1. This went better than expected. You all had some really great conversations with some really cool people, and I'm excited to be more a part of the podcast this time around. So really excited to be here and excited of, I know we got a lot of cool guests coming up this season as well.
Yes, absolutely. And I know we interviewed Paige, who is the other co-founder of SBNC. We interviewed Paige last season, if you want to call it, but we haven't had you on the show yet. So I'm excited to gather your insights on some stuff, especially given your background, your academic background. You know a lot of stuff about a lot of stuff. So before we get
Hey, I
into
try.
it,
I try.
we all try, right? You know, fake it till you make it sometimes. But before we get into kind of like some discussion for today, I just wanted to ask if you had anything else you kind of wanted to share a little bit more about, the story behind SBNC. I know I mentioned how you started this partly when you were in college still at the University of Tennessee. So just for people who are listening, if you want to just share a little bit more about what kind of the process behind creating SBNC looked like.
Yeah. Well, I won't get into the full history. That'll have to be a whole other show in and of itself and all the lessons we've learned along the way. But long story short, SBNC or Student Basic Needs Coalition, we started as a student organization. And I know a lot of our listeners are student organization leaders on their campus. So I know where you're coming from. I've been there. And we were just a organization that started up at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. And that's where I went to undergrad. And kind of what I saw there, I was working as a resident assistant in the dorms. And I saw so many students dropping out of school on my floor that, the students I was responsible for. And they were dropping out not because they weren't succeeding academically, they were doing great. They were involved on campus. They were really on track to get their degree. But as in talking to these students and why that they were choosing to not continue their education, I kept hearing a very common theme. And the research backs this up, is the reason why the most common reason why students don't continue their education is finances. It is so expensive to pay for school. A lot of students are doing that on their own. And it's not just those tuition costs, it's those living expenses that sometimes aren't really totally factored into the cost of attendance. So I really saw, so many students experiencing this. I myself was struggling financially as well, and knew what that struggle was as well, and was eating not probably the best or most nutritious food, and kind of what that led to is starting that first chapter of SBNC. And kind of what we started doing was advocating for our peers and those on our campus around not those big costs of tuition and attendance, but those other costs, those living expenses. And we really started to focus on college student food insecurity. And around 1 in 3 students experience food insecurity as defined by federal definitions of food insecurity. And that's a huge problem. That is more than double the rate of the general population. And there's such a stereotype around, the starving college student. And that's really what SBNC is mainly focused on addressing, is counteracting that cultural acceptance of hunger or severe financial insecurity among college students, because that doesn't set them up for success. And so we really started advocating a lot. We did advocacy at the campus level and got some policies changed, instituting a food pantry among one of the things that we advocated for. Other things that we did is we started to work at the state level, and then the pandemic happened. We had just introduced legislation in Tennessee, and then the pandemic happened. And everything got derailed, as everybody can remember. And this was a really interesting point in higher ed's history, because it really disrupted everything on campus, just like how everything was disrupted with COVID. But on campus, I think it really showed people the disparities among different populations of students and their financial security, because everybody got so disrupted. And institutions really started paying a lot more attention to making sure that student food insecurity, among other financial and basic needs insecurities, were addressed. So that was an interesting point for us, because we were already talking about this stuff, even though not everybody was listening. So we really took that energy, and I teamed up with Paige, who was doing similar work at North Carolina State University, and we kind of grew from there. And now we are a big, well, not big, but we've grown to be a national nonprofit, and we work in all 50 states. Yes, I guess we have gotten big at this point. And there's several people on staff now. We've grown a lot since even this podcast started last year. And we're really excited about the future, because people are paying attention to these issues. We've got solutions for them. And now it's about getting those solutions in people's hands.
That's awesome. Thanks for providing that context. I mean, even, in the role that I have with you all, I'm still always learning more just about the overall work that you all do, kind of the origin story of that. So it's always nice to hear as a reminder and a motivator of why we continue to do this work. Because I know for me too, working in higher ed around basic needs access, it's become such a passion of mine. And I always thought it was such a niche thing, but it's so nice to know that many people are working on this around the country, and we can all really mobilize and join efforts to make this truly a super big movement. And that's what you all are doing with SBNC. So happy to be a part of that.
Yeah, we're glad to have you, Taylor. Couldn't be doing it without you.
Thank you. So I know that with every episode, there's definitely not a shortage of news in higher ed, as you may know.
Especially right now.
No, especially right now. So, the goal is that with every episode, we're kind of taking more of a little bit of a deeper look into some of these different news topics within higher ed, sometimes doing a deep dive into one particular topic, sometimes maybe overviewing or discussing a little bit more in depth a few different topics. So today I have two different topics picked out that I think you might have some insights and might want to share your thoughts about. And so our first topic that I want to touch on today focuses on international student enrollment in the US. That has been a big talking and discussion point lately, as we know, and it has seen a sharp decline in recent months for a number of reasons. But according to some recent articles that I was reviewing from outlets such as Inside Higher Ed, the New York Times, they're saying, nearly 20% fewer international students arrived in the US this August compared to last year, which I found to be pretty striking. So I definitely want to get your take on this. And I have some questions about it just because, in the reading that I was doing, something that I found really striking, and I guess I'll start there, is that these declines in international student enrollment in the US weren't necessarily uniform, meaning that what I read saying, some of these arrivals from Africa were down 32%, Asia down 24%, in the Middle East 17%, while international student arrivals from places such as Europe and Oceania stayed relatively steady. And so my first question, given all of that information, is first like from your perspective, what global or policy factors do you think are currently driving these regional disparities in international student arrivals?
Yeah, well, there's a lot going on here. And this is really a huge issue for higher education that I do not think is getting the attention that it deserves. Um, so I know you previewed the numbers, Taylor, but 20%, one in five, uh, uh, students that typically would be coming into the country here for higher education are not. And while that might not seem huge, it is because there's so much baked into the way that higher education works in America that relies and expects on international enrollment. And when you pull the rug out on international enrollment, it is going to cause a lot of downstream effects at different institutions and different institution types. And I know we're going to be talking about that here in a minute. But I think like coming back to like on a macro level, I can understand why people might hear this and be like, this is not our problem. We've got enough problems here in the US, and whether or not international students are able to come here and enroll it should not be a policy issue for us in the US. There are plenty of students, and you hear some of the reasonings why it's, the Trump administration and others have made it more difficult for international students to come here, is sometimes they'll make the argument that international students are taking away resources or spots at institutions that should be allocated or reserved for domestic students. And I think it's important to note, it's like, yes, you can make that argument all day, but that's not reflective of reality. And we've built a system of higher education that in part relies and depends on these foreign enrollments, and not to mention all the other beneficial factors of having international students in our country. But the argument that is in support of making it harder for international students to come here, that's often quoted, but it's just not reflective of how most institutions operate. So I want to kind of set that base understanding. As for like my perspective on like what global factors are, driving like the regional disparities, I think it's choices that the administration's making. We are making it much harder, particularly for students in China or students from China or India, India in particular, to come to the U.S. And we've seen that, and I've talked to a lot of international students over the past couple months that have experienced these issues, people that haven't been able to get their visas to come back, people that have had to self-deport because around in the summer, there was a big wave of they were then deemed inappropriate, rescinding of people's student visas. So I think it's policy decisions have led to the disparities, and I think we don't see as much of a dip in students from Europe and Oceania. I think primarily that's capturing students from Australia and New Zealand. But we're not seeing as much of a dip of them because I just think there are different resources available to more students from those places to kind of navigate the complexities of this rapidly changing environment of the legality of coming to the US and studying.
You bring up a lot of good points. And going off of that, I'm curious, how much of this decline do you think is a result of one, visa and travel restrictions at the federal level through the Trump administration versus, people in other countries seeing this play out and having changing perceptions of what it would be like to study in the US? Because it doesn't seem very welcoming right now, I would say.
Yeah, and I think that second part is, I think, more worrisome in the long run is these changing perceptions of the U.S. So, of course, to your first point of the difficulty around even obtaining the visa to attend, and the travel visa or student visa to get here, is a huge problem because if you can't get that, it makes it very hard to actually get here and start attending classes. And yes, there's Zoom and whatnot, but schools have different requirements on what visas need to be obtained even without being in person. And there are a lot of issues with when you delay things for a student, the semester's kind of set. Everybody's relying off of that at a particular institution, and institutions really aren't able to get students like caught up to speed if they're not able to get here for months when classes have already started. And yes, a lot can be done over Zoom, but a lot of students are that are coming, or international students that are coming here to study at American institutions, are in the STEM fields and often researchers that they need to be in the lab. They need to be able to be physically in the space to conduct the research that they want to do. It doesn't apply to everyone, but it does apply to a lot. So I think that causes those practical concerns of logistics and legality are catching a lot of students and preventing them from enrolling. And then that second part, the perceptions, like I said, I think that this is the more troublesome thing. This is going to be harder to change, even if policies of this administration change or the next administration roll back some of these restrictions and make it easier for students to get here. And I don't think we have an answer for that yet. I think this is tied into like a larger conversation or larger shifts in how America, not just in the higher ed or job market, is viewed, or the opportunity here is viewed, but just how our country is viewed holistically by the rest of the world. I think we see this all the time. The rest of the world doesn't know what's going on here or how to predict what we're going to do. And there are plenty of other very great universities across the world and countries that are much more stable politically right now, that I think students are especially from India and China and are going to choose to go to either domestically within their own countries or in other countries like Australia and in Europe.
Yes, you took the words right out of my mouth. I was just kind of thinking about that too, because something you had said earlier, talking about the ways that American institutions res expect and plan for kind of international student enrollment as part of their models for operating. And as a result of this, a lot of experts are saying that these declines in international student enrollment could deepen next year as students look to places like Canada, the UK, and Australia. like you mentioned. And so, since many universities, especially public universities, depend on international student tuition to fund their operations, and even some student support programs, what do you think the financial and operational consequences could be if these declines continue?
Yeah, well, we're already seeing the effects of this, like right now. So there was a recent article in Reuters that really kind of talked about like the financial impact that these changes are having, or these changes in international student enrollment are having on campuses. And they identified about 35 different campuses across the country that are starting to cut staff, programs, etc., because of the declines in enrollment. So I think one of the schools they talk about is DePaul in Chicago, where I'm located, and they have about a 30% student enrollment decrease this year because of the drops in international student enrollment. And I think the numbers there are not clear of like how much money they're having to cut from their budget, but they've indicated that they're doing that. And there are about 35, like I said, other schools that they've already identified that are doing that as well. The article also talks about like how John Hopkins is cutting a lot of research programs, not only because of the student enrollment, international student enrollment declines, but also with all this research funding that's being cut for these research institutions like John Hopkins. So I think it's kind of a perfect storm right now of, I know we're not talking about that a lot in today's episode of all the research money that's being cut, but that's compounding on top of what's going on with international student enrollment too. So I think we're going to see more of this, unfortunately. And the trend since the Great Recession, and even before it, is states at public institutions have invested less and less money per student across the board. And states are not itching to pick up the bill, whether it's a red state or a blue state, to keep these public institutions to fill in the gaps of what they're losing from federal research dollars being cut and the declines in enrollment. And I don't know if we've said this explicitly yet, but the reason why international student enrollment is so important for a financial standpoint is often international students are paying full sticker price more often than not for school. So that is different than what a lot of domestic students are paying. So that's why it's an even bigger punch to the school's budget when a international student chooses not to enroll versus domestic. And I'm painting with broad brushes here. There's lots of exceptions, I'm sure, at lots of different institutions, but overall, really, really concerning. And I worry about what next year will look like too.
Yeah, as you were describing that, I was thinking of something you were saying earlier about folks and students in the US who might even be saying or thinking to themselves, like, how does a decline in international student enrollment affect me, right? It, I'll admit, in America, it does tend to come down to like, how is this issue serving me? How does this issue affect me, right? Because, folks are thinking on that individual level sometimes, but you kind of really paint how, one, I mean, we should care about this issue for many reasons, but for folks who might be thinking along those lines, you're kind of painting out how this decline is having effects for all students at these institutions, with cuts to important research programs, essential resources, staffing shortages. Like these are things that are not just going to affect international students at these campuses. They're affecting all students who invest their money to study and get an education there.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like, I feel like we're talking so much on the practical side of things and on the money side of things and numbers, but there's also like a reality on these campuses where I think international students bring such a extra element to the campuses that they're on. I know in my experience, when I was an undergrad, a lot of my friends who were international students were involved in cultural groups on campus and identity-based groups. And as we see funding cut for DEI programs and identity-based services on campus, I think pulling out a lot of the international student presence is further going to make it harder for sometimes these small, identity-based student groups and whatnot to exist without members coming in to provide more to that group and help, with its programming and whatnot, as well as that rollback from the institution level of what's being funded and provided to these groups as well. It's kind of perfect storm for them as well.
You're absolutely right. Beyond the numbers, international students have a story. They enrich campus communities. And I remember even my time in college was so enriched by the students that I was able to meet, the friendships that I was able to forge, especially, studying international affairs, of course. But beyond that too, I notice in every part of campus life, international students shape dialogue. They help with cultural understanding. And those are things that carry with us and that we, I think, need to be better humans, right? And so what you kind of touched on this a little bit as well, but can you speak more to the social or educational consequences that you foresee as a result of fewer international students being part of our educational landscape?
Yeah, and it's I feel like what I was saying about like the student groups and identity groups on campus, I think are going to take a really big hit. And I'm sure already have, as they've experienced this decline. But, I don't want to like cordon off international students, fully. And I want to be clear about, how we're talking about this too, is while a student may be from a different country, they're still a student, a part of that campus community. And if you wake up one day and 20% of the campus community is gone, that's going to be painful. And I know it has been on a lot of campuses. Less people is less perspectives. And like what you're saying, Taylor, is I think it's a huge deal within a classroom environment. I feel like a lot of the classes that I was in were really enriched by the perspectives people were bringing from other countries. And I think I really view, I have a very optimistic view of higher education as a tool to really expose the student to diverse perspectives and let them make decisions on what they believe after that exposure. And I think removing a lot of that exposure to folks that are from and grew up in other countries is, I think, a real shame, I think, and a real I'm very sad about that, for that students aren't going to be exposed to that in the same way, or maybe at the frequency or volume that they may have been in the past.
Thank you. My last question that I kind of want to touch on as it relates to this topic, um, is kind of like how do we move forward despite all this, right? Like, do you think the US can rebuild or I don't know, maintain, if you want to say that, a sense of global connectedness after, these recent trends? And how do you think higher ed leaders, myself included, can continue to best support international students who do remain at U.S. higher ed institutions? Because you're absolutely right, they are part of the campus community, and we want to communicate that through our actions. So, what kind of final thoughts do you have on that moving forward?
Yeah, I think coming from my background being in like college affordability, student basic needs, things of that nature, that's what really comes to mind to me first. Is like we at SBNC do a lot around helping enroll students in public benefits such as SNAP, which provides food benefits, or Medicaid, healthcare, is a lot of what we do. And over the years, as we've done this work, we've had a lot of international students look for assistance. And these programs don't, or international students are typically not eligible for either of these programs. And so that means that I think it's so important that campuses, because like we've seen it, we've seen international students experience college food insecurity, financial insecurity, at very high rates, just like the rest of the student population. And I think it's important that even though they might not be eligible for programs like SNAP or Medicaid, proactively reaching out to these students, making them feel at home, and trying to get them plugged into other resources that might be able to assist them on their basic needs is the right thing to do for any student. But I think particularly for our international students that are feeling, I'm sure there's going to be research coming out here about, international student sentiment on their campuses. I haven't seen a ton yet, but they're probably feeling very, and the students I've talked to are feeling very isolated, very attacked in a way. So I think doing what we can to make sure that international students know that while policies may not reflect this, that their campus community wants them there, wants them actively participating, and wants to support them and invest in their success is more important now than ever.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Owen. That was great. So now we're gonna switch gears a little bit to talk about another topic that you might be more familiar with as well, which is AI in higher education, right? More good, more harm? We're gonna find out.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so,
this is
yeah,
a big question. Big question.
yes, and it's always been actively developing. But an Economist article I looked at from last year kind of highlights the scope of technology and the digital transformation, and they highlight how, as of the time that the article was written, most universities still spend only roughly about 5% of their budgets on technology, compared to nearly 8% for an average American company. But now, with the rise of generative AI and all of these AI platforms, I'm personally losing track of all of these different ones. Gemini, ChatGPT, like there's so many different names.
There's a bajillion of them out
I
there.
know, and I don't know, they all have different purposes and whatnot, but they're beginning to reshape how students learn and how institutions operate. There's no questions about that. It's definitely seeping into every pocket and corner of US institutions and just education in general, K through 12 included. And so the article also points out that while many educators were initially hesitant or feared that students might use AI to, cheat, so to speak, or to, take shortcuts with their learning, the conversation kind of now is shifting toward, kind of this acceptance that these tools are not going to go anywhere. So how can we support more personalized learning and streamline administrative tasks and even make one-to-one tutoring accessible at scale? So that kind of just highlights how the conversations around AI are kind of shifting now to how do we prevent it, or how do we like keep it out of classrooms? So now, we have this tool. How can we really just make the most of it? And so, given your experience leading SBNC and integrating AI into your organizational workflow, yeah, I just want to talk a little bit about how technology kind of fits into higher ed and whether, you think it's helping or hindering. I think I might have an idea, but whether you think it's helping or hindering the learning process.
Yeah, so I got a lot of thoughts on this. And like you said, Taylor, like we at Student Basic Needs Coalition use a lot of AI. We really do. And particularly in our product, our tool that we have called Navi. And this is the screener tool where it uses AI in part to determine, using like a screener or a questionnaire, determine if a student's eligible for public benefits such as SNAP and Medicaid, and if they are eligible, helping them through the process of applying, and then when the tool is fully implemented or on a campus, students can directly apply for SNAP all straight through the tool, or Medicaid, or any other benefits that we hope to add in the future. And like, AI has made that tool so powerful and is ultimately helping connect students to public benefits such as SNAP and Medicaid. And a big reason why only that there's such a big gap between it's called the college student SNAP gap, and essentially 30% of only 30% of students that are eligible for SNAP are actually enrolled in it. So 70% of students that are eligible for SNAP are not enrolled and missing out on the money that they're entitled to. And a big reason why that exists is because of the paperwork and bureaucratic and nightmare that it is applying for benefits like this. If you've done it before, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I'm sure there are people that are going to listen to this and say, hey, I tried and I gave up because it was so complicated. So AI is like a wonderful tool to make it easier for students to, or really anybody, when a tool is built, to apply for benefits or use it to streamline processes. So that's a good side of AI. And I would say, I am skeptical of some of the applications of AI. I think, but I do think at the end of the day, AI is a tool that can be used for good or for bad. It depends on the user, or not so much the user, but the product builder, or who's using AI. Not essentially, it's a tool. It can be used for good. It can be used for bad, and it's being done in both ways now. There are great uses of AI, like what I was saying about how we use it with helping students reach benefits. But there are bad uses, I would say, or maybe not productive uses, or potentially harmful uses of it as well, and inside higher ed and outside higher ed. I would say in the classroom, I have heard from students that are getting like computer science degrees, or software engineering degrees right now, or studying technology. And this semester, I think more than last year, they have gotten in. I've heard a lot from a lot of students. In their syllabus, it says you can start using AI now. In our class, in developing the products or software that you're building for a project, you can use it because this is the way that things are going. It makes things faster. It makes good quality product and software. And I think that's really interesting because it's, I think, markedly different than how people were talking about this even a year ago. And I know that there are other disciplines that are starting to do this too. I think where I get really, scared about its impact on education, higher education, is when students aren't being taught critical thinking skills, critical logic skills, research skills, truth-finding skills that I think were necessary to successfully, write a paper in undergrad and whatnot. And if AI is like replacing too much of that, or if professors or instructors or institutions are relying too much on AI to kind of teach those skills, I get worried that those aren't going to get developed in the way that they should be. So that's a worry. And then there's like the other stuff with AI being like a companion and people putting like a persona on it. I think that is wrapped up in what's going on in higher ed with AI because students are lonelier than they've ever been before. And I think it is imperative that schools keep trying to develop in person social experiences and opportunities for students to connect in real life, and not everybody just going to their dorm room, doing AI homework and talking to their AI bot and then going to class and then going back to their dorm room, or their apartment or whatever. So I think there's a lot going on with AI in higher education inside and outside of the classroom. But I think my overarching theory is it's a tool. It can be used for good. It can be used for bad, and it can be used for, I guess, neutral things. And I think different uses are in all three of those categories.
Thanks for breaking that down. Yeah, I know it's not necessarily such a clear answer to give. Is AI good or bad, really? Because, like you mentioned, there are many ways to use AI for greater good, to make things more efficient, as you mentioned, and really help with some of those, you know, human inefficiencies that we can't always get to, or do like within our own working day. Like, I know for me, I'm kind of guilty because I'm not gonna lie, AI helps me a lot, like with, rewording emails and doing those easy things that for me with ADHD, sometimes writing an email is a lot. So I'll write it out, and be like, help me make this sound a little bit more professional. But yeah, I'm just thinking in a college
Yeah.
landscape, if students are being like, write this essay for me, like, that can be a little bit trickier. But I'm happy to know that also, professors and people in higher ed are really starting to, think of different ways that, students can really work with the tool while not compromising uh, the ways that they're learning, essentially. Um, but with that, there has been a growing debate about where AI belongs most in higher ed. You know, as a student, they can use it as a study or advocacy tool, as we talked about. Faculty and staff use it for either like course design or using it for, as we talked about, administrative efficiency, all the emails I gotta send. So based on what you've seen in the work that you do, where do you think, just on your own opinion, where do you think that AI can have the most immediate and positive impact in higher ed, or like where should universities also be most careful with it?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest thing, the biggest upside of AI in a higher ed context is exactly what you're talking about, Taylor. Is making it easier for professors or departments to give personalized information. The institution itself give personalized information about different resources. Such as potential SNAP eligibility or whatnot to students in mass without needing to significantly staff up to add kind of extra layers of service or personalization. So I think that's a really great usage, and I think where I've seen, talking with, I know lots of folks that work at lots of different institutions, and I think there's a real hesitancy still around employing and deploying AI in workflows within higher ed, like the actual running of the university. And I think that is what I think more institutions should be focused on. And I know it's going to take time, but I think it can create a better student experience for a lot of students.
So, of course, I mentioned, SBNC utilizes AI pretty heavily within organizational workflow. And so, from an organizational standpoint, and given that SBNC works with universities and colleges across the country, how do you see nonprofits such as Student Basic Needs Coalition using AI to strengthen their mission and impact?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I think just like what I said about higher education being hesitant, or like the administration of higher education being hesitant to adopt AI meaningfully within their workflows, and AI products into kind of what they do and how they support students. Nonprofits, I think, are also very, very hesitant. And like we at SBNC, I kind of like to, say is we're very much an AI first nonprofit. There are lots of live people behind the organization and what we do. But what we have been able to do is really structure the organization to use a lot of AI, because funding a nonprofit is hard. And every single dollar that any nonprofit receives, they have to be so careful about to squeeze as much impact as they can out of that dollar, while still paying for everything that they've got to pay, all the overhead. So with SBNC, we've really been able to use AI through, our Navi tool, which is really like an AI driven tool, and through like internal workflows to punch way above our weight in what we're able to have impact on, among our population that we're serving, based in comparison to like the size of our budget of the organization. So, for example, we have been able to connect college students across the country since February of this year to $55 million in SNAP benefits. Yeah, I see, Taylor. I know you get the reports all the time about our numbers. And we've been able to set a really ambitious goal this academic year, of connecting students to $100 million in SNAP benefits. And we are ahead of schedule on that goal as well. And we could not do that without AI. And having our staff members using it not to replace their jobs, but to make them even more impactful. And I think if you talk to anyone on our team, we've all become really AI literate. We use it a lot, and we joke about it too. And I think that's an important thing that, I know you mentioned earlier, like, I feel like I'm cheating by saying that I use it and helping me compile an email or something. I think that's a lot of people's sense of AI, is that it's like cheating. And I don't view it that way. We don't view it that way. We view it as a way to make us more productive and more impactful and save our mental energy for the really big things that AI can't do, such as setting strategy, coming up with real new ideas, and helping us, draft an email a little quicker is only, or, using AI in our screening process and enrollment process and for benefits is, a force multiplier, and is only really, as far as we have evaluated so far, making us a better organization that's more effective, than hindering kind of the quality of anything that we're doing.
That's really well said. I think that's a good note to kind of leave off on as we close out our discussion on that, because yeah, there are many things that AI can't do. And as you were saying in the beginning, with, this trend of loneliness, especially among students too, AI, as much as folks might think, cannot form or help human connection. We still are responsible for that as humans. And so I think that,
For
you
now,
know,
for now.
yeah, I know. But I think that's why it's great to always hear about like an organization like SBNC who uses AI definitely as a tool, as a way to scale up, as you were mentioning, but also, like you said, there's very human team behind SVNC, and you all make sure that you make time to meet and have those engagements with each other as well. And I think that is the ultimate combination for a great team and a great organization. So thanks for your insights on both of these topics today. I learned so much, actually. Uh, and I'm the one who created this outline. So
Hey, well,
thanks.
I'm thrilled to be hopping on the podcast pretty frequently moving forward. This was a great conversation, Taylor. I'm really excited to get season two up and live here, and I will talk to everybody next session.
Yes, absolutely. So, again, everyone, we heard from Owen Tanner-Flomberg today. Thank you again, Owen. As I mentioned, can't thank you enough. Owen will be on future episodes. But with that, stay tuned because up next, I'll be talking to Matt Marks, a double alum turned staff member at the University of Oklahoma, who's doing incredible work around food access on his campus. You don't want to miss it. See you soon. All right. So today we are joined by Matt Marks. Matt Marks is the Assistant Director of the OU Food Pantry within the Office of Advocacy and Education at the University of Oklahoma. Matt also serves as the advisor to students who run the OU Food Pantry operations. And Matt is a two-time graduate of the University of Oklahoma as well, with a bachelor's in broadcast journalism and a master's in adult and higher education. As an undergraduate, Matt was part of the team within OU's Student Government Association that created the OU Food Pantry. So, welcome, Matt. It's great to have you.
Thank you, Taylor. It's great to be with you today.
Awesome. So we'll jump right into some questions. That's quite an impressive bio you have there. It seems like you've really been dedicated to this work for a while. You mentioned or I mentioned in the bio that you were part of Student Government Association's team that helped create the OU Food Pantry as an undergraduate, which is awesome. So can you just walk me through kind of what sparked that initiative in your undergraduate years and what those early conversations kind of look like?
Yeah, I've been really thankful for my time here at the University of Oklahoma. When I was an undergrad, it was kind of funny. I had an opportunity. I ran for our student government president, vice president. And while the campaign did not work out really well, I was really glad actually losing that election. I had the opportunity to work with two really amazing gentlemen, in Daniel and Michael, that were our president and vice president around 2016. And I had an opportunity to serve in their cabinet as their executive assistant. And it was after one of our meetings in early 2016 that Daniel and Michael approached me and said, Matt, we've talked about for a long time, the university is wanting to get a food pantry at OU. Would you mind heading up a task force of other cabinet members, and let's plan this out? And for me, I was like, this is an incredible opportunity. I've done food drives in the past that reminded me of high school and student council, and I love the competition of let's see how many cans we can raise and let's help a lot of folks. And so we spent about a year planning what this food pantry could look like at the University of Oklahoma. We toured another campus food pantry up in Edmond at the University of Central Oklahoma. We did a little bit of research on what other food pantries around the United States were doing. But then we organized a student team. We had a faculty and staff kind of steering committee that assisted us as students. And about a year later, early 2017, we were able to open. We had some ups and downs. It wasn't just a smooth process. There were some times where we didn't think this was going to happen, but thanks to some really amazing support across campus, we were able to officially open our doors in March of 2017.
That's awesome. And that's interesting that you say around 2016, 2017 is when these conversations started to happen. Because in my own work, I know I mentioned offline with you that I also am in food systems work, particularly in a higher ed setting. In both my alma mater, where I worked as an undergraduate student as the student worker for the food pantry, and now working in a professional role, both food pantries now that I've worked for, both started around that same year as well, 2016, 2017. So I'm kind of curious maybe what was happening around that time that was kind of sparking these national kind of conversations around having college food pantries and what it means to experience food insecurity as a college student.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you there. I mean, there's a lot. I've talked to a lot of folks. Even when the University of Oklahoma was back in the Big 12 conference, we had a few other institutions that started around the same time. So I'm with you. What in that time frame? Because I know there have been food pantries that early 2000s, maybe 2010s, but the late 2015 to 2020 range, a lot of food pantries felt like it became more of a common place on college campuses. So I'm with you there. I don't know what sparked it right at that time, you know?
Yeah, but I do know, now mentioning that you were a student around the 2016, 2017 year, but now, you're serving as the assistant director. We know that in that time period, COVID
For sure.
was introduced to the United States, and that has, played a part in, the need for college food pantries. So, given that you helped create OU's food pantry as a student leader, and now you're the assistant director working more in a professional capacity. What motivated you to continue working in this space professionally? And how do you think your perspective has changed from being a student at OU to now being a staff?
Yeah, I always say it goes back to the people. I love the students and staff at the University of Oklahoma. I really have enjoyed, working with friends back in undergrad to help create this, but then getting to meet the clients that utilize the food pantry and meeting the students that over the years have decided they want to join forces and work towards, making our campus a better place through this resource. I always say it goes back to the people, the stories over the years, folks that I've gotten to meet that maybe our paths would have never crossed, walking on campus. I get to learn about what they're studying, maybe what their job is at the university, learn about their families. I've had clients over the years that it's almost like they become part of my family. Like every week we're picking up a conversation from the week before. It's really powerful. So it goes back to the people. But also for me personally, when we started this and even today, I want to help make a difference. That to me is a personal motto for myself. How can we, again, make campus a better place? How can we help students and staff that just need a little extra assistance, whether that may be a snack for the day, maybe it's a couple meals for the day or for the week? And even beyond the meals, we have other things within our food pantry. What can we do to help them out? And that, I think, is a driving force for me. We have three core values: care, community, and commitment within our organization, and that also inspires me. I want to be committed to this because I care about everyone. I care about our community, and it's wonderful work. And I work with the best team ever, and I'm just blessed to continue to work in this role.
That's amazing. I really resonate with a lot of what you say, and I really appreciate the lens that you approach this through in more of a humanistic way, right?
Hmm.
We can read the data, we can see the numbers, but it's really the stories and the people that we interact with day to day that really make this career meaningful. And that also, I think, aligns with more national efforts to not only make this a matter of food access, but a matter of dignity and making, more improvements to these food pantry operations that make it more a community of care. And so that kind of leads me to my next question is I'm just kind of curious, how is the OU food pantry structured today? What does a typical day or week look like in terms of operations, and how are students involved? What does student involvement look like with that?
For sure. When we started back in 2017, we had 9 students that ran the operations from marketing to the volunteering to the day-to-day. Now we have a team over 100 students that operate everything. It's impressive. We have an operations staff, a logistics team, recovery and distribution, a development. I mean, you name it. Every little aspect of this pantry is run by students. And I want to also say that they're not being paid. This is a volunteer opportunity. So we have 100 committed students, and that's what I love about it. They want to make this campus better each day. And so I'm truly blessed. It's great to have an organization like this, not only for the students, for the leadership development, but just creating a culture around volunteering and creating a culture that is just some positivity. You look at the news all the time, and it's just depressing story after story. And what we want to do here at OU is create just kind of a light that can help shine with the other amazing things that are happening on our campus, and let people know, hey, we exist. We're here to serve our campus community. I mean, we're unique. We're not serving the city of Norman or Oklahoma City or the area. Like, we're just serving the campus community. We only serve student, staff, faculty. But it's so unique, and there's so much of a need on our campus that it's great to have peers helping their peers and helping maybe someone that could be an instructor for them. Like, the connections run deep here, and I'm really proud of these students that they want to dedicate part of their very busy college careers to be part of it. They apply to be a part of our team, they get accepted, and then they have a couple of hours each week where they're doing a shift or they're working behind the scenes to make this all possible.
Wow, when you said 100 volunteers, I was not prepared. Like, we have volunteer programs like set up for our food pantry as well, but not to that scale. That's very impressive. And just to follow up with that, just so I'm understanding, it sounds like this is a pretty wide scale volunteer network of students, but do you also have any, I know you're a paid staff member, but do you have additional colleagues who are paid staff who work with the OU Food Pantry? Do you have paid student staff as well? Like, how do you balance leadership between staff and student leaders?
Yeah, so really, basically, I'm the only staff member with the food pantry. I do have my supervisor who's within our office. She's very supportive and will help me out as well. But really, it's myself advising the students, and it's been a really good balance. Our executive committee, so we have about 8 or 9 students on our executive committee that will lead individual teams within the organization, and we work really well together. I sometimes forget the students are actually students. Like, I see them as colleagues, and we're working on this business together to try to help take care of campus. And I'm like, oh yeah, you got a test coming up, or you gotta go do this. I'm like, oh yeah, but the students will be here almost as much as I am. Like, they're here all the time because they love it, and I'm just thankful for them because it is like running a business day by day to do what we're doing.
Absolutely. And yeah, that is so inspiring that students who have all this coursework and all these other involvements, I'm sure it seems like they really are just connected to the mission and really just proud of the work that's being produced out of the OU Food Pantry. So that's great that, they're sticking around out of their own will just because they simply care enough to do so. Switching gears a little bit, or just learning more about kind of what you all offer. Beyond providing groceries, do you provide any additional services or support to students?
Yeah, so we've got our canned goods and fresh produce in the food area. We've got clothing, we have books, we have toiletries, we have a community space. So as you mentioned earlier, we wanted our food pantry to be, as we moved into a bigger space on campus in August of 2022. We started out in a closet, and then we moved into what used to be a food court on campus. So it was a game changer for us. We wanted it to be more of a community center in how we operate, because being in a small room, we made it as great as it could be. We had the walls painted, and we tried to be as inviting as possible. But when we were able to move into a bigger space, we're like, okay, how can we expand and actually have a clothing section? How do we do our fresh produce differently? So now it's like almost when you go to a grocery store, like a deli section. That's kind of how we have our fresh produce in a little area to itself. Toiletries, a community area with TVs and couches. So folks can come in and it's like a home in a way. They can kind of take a break for a little bit and hang out, get their food, but before their next class, they can just kind of rest and hang out. So that's kind of how we wanted to move to a model when we got a bigger space. How do we make it like a home, more of a community center, and not where it's just like maybe where someone might think of a little food pantry and it's just a small room and you just get food and go. We want people to stay a little bit if they'd like.
Yes. I love that idea. And that goes kind of back to what I was talking about with like the dignified like food access model, promoting student choice and really just making these small process changes that have broader effects for how a student feels welcome and feels invited into the space. I think that's just as important as the services that are offered themselves. Um,
100%.
that I had a follow-up question to that when you were mentioning, all of the improvements and all of the changes that have happened to the pantry over time. Of course, I know those don't happen overnight. Was that a process that involved institutional support? Is this donor funded? Kind of going off script here, but I was just curious, given, you mentioned like a TV and like a lounging area and like different sections. That seems like that would take some pretty heavy financial backing.
Yeah, and for when we made the move, I thank OU a lot because they were the building we were in for the first about 5 years or so. They were actually going to be tearing down the building as the campus has been changing over the last couple years with building of new residence halls, and so we had to move. But I think some incredible folks, some staff and faculty here at OU that helped make it possible for us to move into one of our food courts that had been empty since COVID and didn't reopen, and it was a perfect space. It was not even on my radar as we were looking to like where could we move. We were like, just don't put us in a basement, please. Like we just need something, and it's such a visible central location. So I thank OU for that because it's been again a game changer. In terms of our day-to-day and how we are funded, we don't get any money from the university. So we are privately funded, alums and donors that want to support what we're doing. OU gives us the space. We don't have to pay rent. We're not paying utilities. So that's a great gift there. But they don't cut us a check, a monthly check or anything like that. So we're out. We have our development team out talking to donors and alums. We have incredible staff and faculty within OU and working with the university that are development officers that are helping, get the word out about the food pantry. So we've got a lot of people in our corner spreading the word, and we've had a great donor base and alums that really believe this and an incredible community support.
Awesome. I do find, and I've talked to quite a few like food systems workers from other universities, other pockets of community. And yeah, I find that many universities aren't currently being, funded by the university, but it is a huge help for universities to provide the space because we know that that is, a main and probably the biggest challenge of it is just finding where to store everything and again, having that centralized space I think is also very important. So it's great that, y'all were put in some, obscure part of campus. But that kind of leads me to my next question because, a lot of advocates for anti-hunger movements on campus really advocate for university investment through legislation such as hunger-free campus legislation. And so why do you think it's important that universities take ownership of addressing food insecurity rather than, leaving it to maybe external organizations or students or community members, faculty, staff to kind of figure that out?
Yeah, I think it's important when I think of a college food pantry, and especially ours, which we've had incredible support from our president to our VPs to administrators. So very, very thankful there. When you're looking at like a system like ours where we're taking care of our own student, staff, faculty, That's what I think, that's my answer right there. We're taking care of our own. And that's why there needs to be that investment. These are the students that are going to class day by day. These are the employees that are working to make our campus as beautiful as it can be, that are invested in the students, that want to really make OU what it is. And so I think that would be my answer to your question is we want to take care of our own. That's why there needs to be that institutional buy-in. Even if the university isn't going to cut a check, helping with space is a premium. If they can help out there, that's wonderful. If they can help spread the word about the food pantry, help spread the word about the resource, that's critical there too. We have a lot of, I think, staff and even students on our campus because every year, right, you get more staff coming in, a new freshman class coming in. You have to, again, go through the spiel. Here's the food pantry. Here's where we're at. Here's what we do. But there's a lot of folks on campus that still don't know we exist and we're here. And it's been, 8 years going on 9 in the spring. So again, I think it's just what I've been blessed with this university. They have been really supportive. They have really helped us spread that message. There has not been a roadblock where they're like, you can't do this. Like, they have been there along the way. And I hope other institutions are like that. I know not every institution is like that, but I hope others will be supportive because it changes the game. It's again providing a little bit of support just to help folks in their journey while they're here at the university. And I would hope no one would say no to that because it's such a gift when you can help others even in the smallest way.
Speaking of which, I realized when you were speaking earlier, I forgot to follow up and ask, from your experience, what does hunger look like on OU's campus?
Yeah, we had a survey, and I say we, the university sent out a survey last year on a variety of topics. There was one question about food insecurity. And the survey results showed from the students that took it last year, and I don't remember the exact number, but it was like 40 to 50% of students face some level of food insecurity. I know in Oklahoma as a state, and it kind of changes every so often, but we're like the 5th or 6th hungriest state in our nation. So it is pretty high in the state of Oklahoma and very high also on our campus. Again, we want to do our best to bring that number down. We're trying everything that we can. But yeah, food insecurity is a problem in the state of Oklahoma, unfortunately.
Thank you for providing that context. I don't think I knew that. I just realized I lack general awareness about just the Midwest in general and what that scope looks like.
Yeah, it's I know a lot of I think some of the southern states, Oklahoma, kind of all the neighboring states, it's where you've got the top 10 list. Top 10 list we don't want to be on, unfortunately, Do not want to be on it.
So my last question for you is kind of more, I always like to leave things on, a positive outlook. So looking ahead, you've mentioned all these great improvements that have come to the OU food pantry over the last 8, 9 years. So looking ahead now, what is your vision for the OU food pantry and the broader national fight against college food insecurity?
Yeah, that's a great question. I hope we continue to grow totally over the next 5, 10 years. That obviously, you don't want to see the numbers go up. I mean, it's one of those things like you want to help as many people as you want to, but you also don't want to see the numbers go up. I hope, we can help as many folks as possible, and as we continue to grow our resource, I don't know exactly what all that would look like down the road. One idea that we've talked about, and there's areas on campus that already do this, but maybe something we could do for our clients is like a utility assistance program. If we have a client that is having trouble paying rent one month or has maybe a flat tire or something, that we could jump in and say, we got you. Like right now, I would love to add something like that under our umbrella down the road. I'd also like to maybe do some building renovations. We've got, again, a great building, but doing some things inside as we continue to grow and make this space our own. And then just grow our student force. I'll tell you, 9 students 8 years ago to 100 now is incredible. Let's see if we can get to 200 maybe. And maybe that's too much. I don't know. But it would be great to just continue to grow what teams we have. And just have our footprint all over campus, because there are so many students and staff that could benefit from this resource, and we want to reach them. And our students are working so well around the clock right now to make that possible. But what more can we continue to do down the road? And our students are dreaming every day. We have a fun event coming up soon for a pickleball event to help fundraise. We have an annual 5K. So the students are thinking all the time, like, how can we maybe raise money? How can we bring the community together? And how can we get the word out about the OU Food Pantry? So I hope there's a lot of growth over the next 5 and 10 years, that more support around this resource, that we can go make a difference at OU and around the state of Oklahoma.
In the chance that someone or an alum from Oklahoma is listening to this and wants to support and wants to give back, where can they do that? Can they donate online, in person? How does that work?
Yeah, so to kind of give my commercial pitch, you can go to ou.edu/food pantry. There you go, learn more about us. We also have an Amazon wish list on our site, an incredible way for folks that maybe aren't in the area, can go on there and have items sent directly to our pantry. It's an incredible, easy way to give. But if there are folks that are visiting in the area or are in town, we'd love to show you around the space. We'd love to give you a tour and meet some of our team and just show you what we do. So there's so many ways. And I tell people that even if you're not able to give it this time, if you can just tell somebody that we exist, that's a huge win for us. That would help us out tremendously.
Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing your insights and experience. I learned so much, and I'm leaving this conversation feeling inspired. And I just want to thank you for the work that you and your team are doing to support students at the University of Oklahoma. I think it's really inspiring and commendable. And again, for everyone, we've been speaking with Matt Marks, Assistant Director at the OU Food Pantry at the University of Oklahoma. So thanks again.
Thank you, Taylor.
Alrighty, and with that, that wraps up this week's episode of the Student Impact Report. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at SBNC_USA for updates, and you can also catch our episodes on Spotify and YouTube. See you next time.